Hi, I'm Donna Kallner, and this is the techniques video for right-handed stitchers in lesson 1 of the cross knit looping e-course. There are many ways to start a cross knit looping project, as you'll see in this course, but to get started we're going to use a small wooden mold and work in a continuous spiral. The mold helps to simplify the visual field so you can focus on the structure and thread control. I'll demonstrate first with a non-fuzzy waxed thread to make it easier for you to see the structure. Then I'll show you again with wool yarn and you can work along with me. Let's begin this first sample with a wrapped base cord. How you make a wrapped base cord will depend on whether you're right-handed or left-handed, but either way, break a manageable length of yarn, that's hip to tip as you learned in the PDF handout, and thread it on a tapestry needle, leaving a short tail. Wrap the thread around the mold 2 full times. Leave a tail the width of the mold, pointing in the direction you'll advance as you stitch. If you're right-handed, you'll advance from left to right. If you're left-handed, you go the other direction. Wrap a finger of your non-dominant hand around the mold to hold that little tail of the wrapped base cord in place while you get the first stitch made and a few more to control that tail. For the base row, we'll work simple looping. Insert the needle from north to south, passing under all the elements of the wrapped base cord, including the tail, and passing over the working thread. Draw the needle through until it forms a small knot. If you're right-handed, position the knot near the upper left corner of the mold. If you're left-handed, you'll do it the opposite. With the base cord knotted near the top of the mold, you have a firm anchor and the thread in place for your first row of stitching. The wrapped cord should be snug enough that it doesn't easily slip off the mold, but have enough ease to let you stitch into it on the base row. The basic looping stitch feels like the movement used to anchor the wrapped base cord, except you don't pull it into a knot. To make the first stitch, advance a short distance from the knot. Be sure the thread tail is lying parallel to the wrapped base cord and pointing in the direction you advance, so you can trap the tail with your stitches as you advance across the front of the mold. Insert the needle from north to south, passing under all the elements of the wrapped base cord, including the tail, and over the working thread. Draw the thread through, but don't pull it tight this time. You should see a little loop around the base cord. We call that the stitch. The thread that advances from one stitch to the next is the lag between stitches, or simply the lag. When you get to the edge of the mold, flip it over and continue stitching in simple looping all the way around the base cord. Make your last stitch on the base row right next to the stitch you pulled into a knot to secure that wrapped base cord when you started. Once you complete the base row, you need to make 1 stitch of simple looping to get things set up for cross knit looping. For that stitch, insert the needle from north to south under the first lag in the previous row. After this, we start cross knit. In cross knit, you keep advancing in the same direction, but you no longer insert the needle into a lag as you would in simple looping. Instead, we insert the needle behind a stitch in the previous row. To do that, you need to change the orientation of the needle. In simple looping, the needle moves from north to south. In cross knit looping, the needle moves from east to west for a right-handed stitcher. That's roughly east to west. Whether it's simple looping or cross knit looping, the needle passes over the working thread. As I make a few more stitches in this demonstration, let me point out that my non-dominant hand is doing some important stuff. When I complete a stitch, I press my non-dominant thumb over it to help maintain its size and shape. This will look and feel different when you're no longer working with a mold, but I want you to be mindful from the get-go that your stitches are all connected. Also be mindful that you control the allocation of thread between stitches. In other words, the lengths of the lags between stitches is something you learn to control. Thread control is more easily maintained when your hands are close to the work. You don't get it by tugging on the yarn an arm's length away from the fabric. What you want to do is keep moving your hand back close to the work as you draw the thread through on each stitch. We call this stripping the thread. Keep moving your hand back close to the work and strip the thread through a little at a time. As you strip the last inch or so, goose that stitch into place. Goosing is just a little flick of the index finger that nudges the yarn to where you want it. Notice how the short tail of the yarn is caught by my little finger? I can drop the needle and use my thumb and forefinger for stripping and goosing, but the needle's right where I need it when I'm ready to take my next stitch. Notice how the stitches line up one beneath the other. Okay, time to start your first sample of cross knit looping. Break a manageable length of yarn and thread it on a tapestry needle, leaving a short tail. Wrap the tail around the mold 2 full times, leaving a tail the width of the mold pointing in the direction you'll advance as you stitch. For a right-handed stitcher, you go from left to right. Insert the needle from north to south, passing under all the elements of the wrapped base cord, including the tail, and over the working thread. Draw the needle through until it forms a small knot. If you're right-handed, position that knot near the upper left corner of the mold. The base row is worked in simple looping. To make the first stitch, advance a short distance from the knot, insert the needle from north to south, passing under all the elements of the wrapped base cord, including the tail, and over the working thread. Draw the thread through, but don't pull it tight. you should see a little loop around the base cord. That's the stitch. The thread that advances from one stitch to the next is the lag. Be mindful of how much thread you allocate for your lags. Strip the thread as you draw it through and goose each stitch into place. When you get to the edge of the mold, flip it over and continue stitching in simple looping all the way around the base cord. Make your last stitch on the base row right next to the stitch you pulled into a knot to secure the wrapped base cord. Once you complete the base row, make one stitch of simple looping in the first lag in the base row. That sets us up to start cross knit looping. Change the orientation of your needle entry and insert the needle east to west behind the next stitch in the previous row. Notice how the short tail of the yarn is caught by my little finger? I can drop the needle and use my thumb and forefinger for stripping and goosing, and that needle is right where I need it when I'm ready to take my next stitch. Notice how the stitches line up directly, one beneath the other? For your first sample, work in a continuous spiral from the top or rim, the wrapped base cord, down. In a few rows, you'll see your work begin to form a straight-sided, tube-like sleeve of fabric around the mold. Slip that tube off the mold for a second. I want you to feel how stretchy the live edge is compared to the wrapped base cord. Before we go any farther with this sample, I want you to do something really brave that will help you learn something else about this structure. It may look like stockinette stitch in knitting, but what would happen if you did this to knitting? It's so much fun to do that in front of knitters. But back to business now. Okay. Be mindful of your thread control now, and in short order, it will become second nature. Be curious about the structure and see for yourself what it will and will not do. That's all going to be important as we move on in this course, but first, you're going to have to know how to add on when a yarn runs out. I'll show you one way in the next video. Hey, see you there!